hounds, chase ghosts, come sleep, watch out, demons are coming, run, sleep, hide, spirits, ghosts, hide, demons, hounds, ghosts, demons are coming.
Hello, my little hellhounds. Welcome to Home of Scares. If you like the chills running down your spine and to be scared, fueled with anxiety, then join us twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And don't forget to increase your anxiety levels. Just make sure you subscribe. Sleep tight, my hellhounds. Survived kidnapping attempt. Still can't forget their eyes. Posted by Aries 2201. I grew up in a state called Bihar in India. Back then it was one of the most violent places due to constant infighting between Naxals, low caste landless communities, and high caste landlord militias, and everything was scary. High unemployment and lawless was rampant, and frequent massacres were common. Some kilometers from my home in the infamous Laxampar Bath massacre has happened. Due to unemployment, the kidnappings were rampant, and kids whose parents worked for government were frequent targets. Even adults also got kidnapped in broad daylight, and no one could do much until you are some high caste, powerful man who owns some high social status and importance. I went to the local market around 5:30 p.m. for my mother, and my dad already has got vegetables, and came back home just after my mum left to buy some vegetables. And at the time we did not own refrigerators, so my dad asked me to go to market and tell mum to not buy vegetables. It was in walking distance, and just as I reached Main Street, this bike on which two men were sitting with their faces covered suddenly stopped in front of me. I remember half the face of one, the man up to his mouth as his cover was a bit loose. He waved at me and kind of attempted to ask me something so that I can get close. There was something about their eyes which was terrifying. I felt scared a bit, and I saw some elderly people were basically talking 20 meters away from me on the same street. One of the men attempted to get off the bike to chase me, but he suddenly stopped, as maybe he realized that it's not best. So he again sat down and they started riding. I turned around and ran with everything I had, and reached those elderly people. They just drove by next to me, and those elderly people, those people were kind of nice. They asked me my home and recognized my dad immediately, and walked me home, and scolded my dad for letting me go outside alone and be careful next time. Since it has been a long time, I slowly forgot most details of this incident, but don't know why, I can't forget those eyes. There was something really scary about it. If they would have got me, I feel like they would have not let me go and probably would have killed me, even my parents. In 2008, my classmate's brother was kidnapped, and after an intensive search and investigation, police found his body in the forest in the next state. They got the criminals, but she lost her brother. My dog doesn't bark. Posted by Der23. I have not posted much on Reddit, only read some funny things like a lot of people probably do. I never thought I would post something on a platform, but I do not know what to do or who to contact. You see, the past few weeks have been horrible to me. What's supposed to be a fun and exciting time turned into a time of pain and stress. I can tell you now, to see a horror movie is so much different than to live one out. I cannot tell you all the things that have happened, for I would be writing a book if that was the case. I will tell you the most significant things, and maybe someone will know what in God's name has happened. First, I am a 23-year-old student, born and living in the Netherlands. I live in a small student room where I spend most of my time studying. If you want an estimate of how small my student room is, imagine 5 parking spots next to each other and you will have a good estimate. The room got even smaller, figuratively, when my girlfriend of more than 2 years started to hang out in it all the time. So summers can be a very nasty way of spending time in this small room. Luckily, my older sister, who's 20 years older than me, goes on camping vacations with her husband and children to France. This is lucky for me because I can watch her house and dog for almost 3 weeks. I was very excited to go and leave my small room. This was my 4th year watching their house and the 2nd year with my girlfriend. I did not expect much of it, only that it would be a lot of fun, just like all the other years. I would be the king of the castle with a dog. I love dogs, especially this one. I have seen her grow up and she has got very special place in my heart. So when she started to act strange, I knew in the back of my mind something terrible would happen. The dog is not the most handsome dog, but she makes it all up by her kindness towards humans. Every person she meets, it's like it is her best friend. One thing where she stands out from all other dogs is that she never barks, only when she is hurt or sees a cat. This was clear when burglars tried to rob my sister's place, and she greeted the burglars with an excited tail. She is all but a guard dog and would never hurt a fly. I hold this dog so dear that if something would happen to her, I would be devastated. So when she started to act strange, it immediately got my attention. It all started one night when I turned off the lights, closed and locked all the doors, and said goodnight to the dog. I went to bed, and as my girlfriend and I were browsing the internet before we went to sleep, we heard the dog walking towards the stairs and watched the door. I went to see what was going on. She is a real sleeper, and she had never done this in the past 3 years, so it was kind of strange to see her like this. Maybe she missed her real owners. What was strange was, as I looked at her, she looked back at me with frightful eyes, as if she wanted me to stay downstairs. I did not think much of it, but I felt that something was wrong. I went to one of the rooms where you could watch the street from the window and saw a strange figure standing in the middle of the street. I could not see its face nor its appearance. Still, it felt very off. The man looked at our house, just watching it for no reason. I thought the man was drunk or a burglar looking for a house to strike down. I turned on the lights in the room so the person would know the house was occupied. At the time, I found it kind of amusing, thinking it was just like a scenario in one of those bad horror movies. Still, it seemed strange, so I called my girlfriend to come over and show her the strange figure. When she came, the man was already gone, just like a bad horror movie. I did not think much of it, only that it annoyed me having a scared girlfriend next to me. Eventually she fell asleep and I could sleep too. The next morning everything was normal, and I came downstairs to see the dog sitting patiently in her dog basket. No strange sightings of a figure, and my dog acted normal all day long. Nothing strange happened. Only when it became night, the strange things happened again. When I did my normal routine, she went back to watching the door while sitting to the stairs again with those frightful eyes. This happened a few nights, until one night it went even further. My girlfriend was already asleep while I was still browsing, until I suddenly heard a strange peeping noise. It was from the door between the front door and the hallway. This door, you only needed to push it and it would open. You did not need to pull a handle or anything. I went downstairs to look what made this noise, and saw the dog sitting in between the space of the front door and the hallway door. I was amazed she could sit there, because it is a pretty heavy door. Still, I did not think much of it and went back to bed, figuring if she could open it, she could probably also go back to her basket. All this did not cause any alarm or stress, only a weird feeling of something strange happening to the dog. A few nights the same happened, so the strangeness of all of this faded away and I did not think much of it anymore. Sadly, the story does not end there. One day, while my girlfriend and I were sitting in the living room watching Netflix, we heard a strange scratching noise coming from upstairs. At first it sounded like a mouse or a rat, but a very large mouse or rat. It was really loud. My girlfriend screamed the first time we heard it. The dog started to act nervous, and I decided to go upstairs and see what was going on. I did not see anything unusual. I looked in all the rooms and searched for something that looks like a mouse or rat went there, but I didn't find anything, so I went downstairs back to the living room. The moment I sat on the couch, the scratching noises were heard again, followed by creaking noises. The creaking of the floor upstairs was really weird, so I checked it out again, and again I find nothing. I dismissed it as being an old house, but it did make my girlfriend really scared. Much more to my annoyance, I had to explain to her nothing was going on and she should not watch so many horror movies. But I have to admit, I was scared too when I heard the scratching and the creaking noises. The next few days, some other strange things happened. One of the things was that I was upstairs minding my business as I heard my girlfriend go down the stairs. When I went to the living room, she thought that I already walked down the stairs. Eventually we discovered those were not our footsteps, but something else. Another time was the strange noises coming from the gutter. It sounded like someone was scratching the pipes and whispering something. I do not know if that is normal for an old house, but it was not something I liked to hear at that moment. Then one day, while sitting in the living room, a loud bang was heard against our window. I went outside and saw a hurt pigeon laying half dead on the ground. I thought it was because he flew against the window, but the pigeon looked much more hurt than it should have been. We rushed to the animal shelter and they told us the pigeon was attacked by something. I asked if it was a cat, but the veterinarian said the cuts on the pigeon were too strange to be from a cat. She concluded it was more likely someone had done this with a knife. How the pigeon ended up against our window was a mystery. The pigeon was too mutilated to fly, so someone had to throw the poor animal against our window. My girlfriend and I were more and more concerned something very wrong was happening during our stay. We discussed leaving the place and go to my parents, who have a nice large home and a big garden where the dog could roam around. We would have to leave the house alone, hoping no one would rob the place. I did not want to take the risk, so we stayed. Of course, like many of my decisions, it was the wrong one. One day my girlfriend, when I was still asleep, discovered a mud trail on the stairs going to my side of the bed. It was another strange thing on the list of strangeness. It is not like you get a lot of mud on your stairs by accident, and believe me, it was a lot of mud. I had to clean it up. We tried to think what could have caused this, and finally concluded I could have done it. You see, I occasionally sleepwalk. When I was younger, I used to do it as well. It is normal for kids and adolescents to sleepwalk, but adults rarely do it. Only a small percentage of adults sleepwalk. I am part of that percentage. I only sleepwalk when I have really a lot of stress. And normally I am a stress-free guy, but sometimes I like to pull the sheets from my girlfriend and have weird conversations with her during my sleep. The thing is, I never sleepwalk far or do something all too strange. So for me to walk somewhere outside in the mud and then go back to the house would seem impossible. Another thing was that my feet or shoes were clean. My girlfriend went hysteric and I tried to carefully brush things aside and went on with our stay in the house, but it did not take long before we were met with another surprise. The creaking and scratching sounds from upstairs came back as my girlfriend and I were watching Netflix. Our dog got very upset again, and I was done with this nonsense. I went upstairs very angry and looked through all the rooms, searching for something or someone. I did not care if it would be a 10-foot monster trying to kill me. I would have killed it at that moment. I did not find anything, to much of my frustration, and went back downstairs. The moment I wanted to tell my girlfriend I did not find anything, we heard what sounded like weird, loud footsteps coming from upstairs. It seemed like they ran from one room to the other, towards the stairs, and then stopped. My girlfriend now wanted to leave, so we went to my parents. My girlfriend had already packed our bags, if anything weird would happen again, but they were upstairs. I left my girlfriend waiting outside with the dog, who ran outside the moment the door opened. I mustered the courage to go upstairs and get the bags. On my way up, I did not see anything strange, but when I left, I saw a strange dark thing in the corner of my eye. It made me feel so uneasy, I almost cried. I ran down the stairs and drove as fast as we could to my parents. My parents did not believe us, but still were very nice in letting us stay with the dog. All the strange things that happened were gone and we could finally rest with ease. If you think the story ends here, then you're wrong. When I left the house, I turned on the alarm with an app on my phone. I would be notified if someone would be breaking in. The cameras in the house would go on and would see the perpetrator. It happened 4 times that alarm went off. 4 times there was nothing to be seen on the camera. It was so annoying. The neighbours started to complain, and I did not want my sister to come back earlier than planned, so I had to go back to the house. My girlfriend refused and did not want to come back, so I went alone with the dog. In front of the house, I had to force the dog to go in. She gave the sad peep dogs make when they are hurt or scared, and I knew it was an awful choice to go back in there. I decided not to go upstairs and stay on the ground floor during daytime. I went to the city with my dog and go to the house when it became dark. At night I slept with my dog close to me and hoped nothing strange would happen. My bags were at all the time packed and I had the police number on speed dial. I only had to wait a few more days until my sister came back and I could go. I hated staying there, and so did the dog. Every time we came back, I had to force her in. At one point while I was doing the dishes, and she growled at me. She even started to show her teeth. It was something she had never done before. I stepped away and I noticed she did not growl at me, but at the sink. I looked at the sink and then I heard it. The weird scratching noise I once heard coming from the sink now sounded like whispers. I could not hear what kind of language it was, but it was foul and sounded very evil. The hairs on my neck stood straight up as I heard the whispers, filling my ears with frightful sounds. I stepped away and went outside with the dog again. That night I slept very bad, having the strangest and frightful dreams in my entire life. I woke up with sweat on my forehead, all disorientated, not knowing what was happening. I looked to see if I saw my dog, but she was nowhere to be found. I looked around in different rooms, but could not find her, until suddenly she started to bark very loudly. I ran towards the sound and saw her barking and growling towards the window. Her bark is very powerful and strong, so it startled me when I saw her barking into the nothingness of the night. What is worst of all is that my dog does not bark. She just does not. So something or someone was doing something that made her bark so harsh and loud. I looked outside into the garden to see what was causing all this, but I did not see anything. Then the dog went back, peeping and hiding behind me. I looked at my dog as she had her tail under her legs. I looked back into the darkness and I saw something I probably never get out of my head. I just cannot explain what it was, only the feeling of being lost in the world. It felt like I was done for. A depression that filled my body gave me thoughts of ending it all. It felt like my body froze and I could not do anything. Luckily, we as humans have this amazing thing to act in the most frightful things in our life. Suddenly I felt a rush of energy, a powerful feeling where I could do anything. I grabbed my dog and took the dog outside. I ran to the car and just drove away. Looking back in the mirror, I saw the strange figure watching me from the street. I drove to my parents with the dog, and I am planning on never returning to that house. I really do not know what to do now. My sister is coming back in a few days, and I do not know what to say to them. For now, I am still shaking at the thought of what was going on in that house and what I saw. This is the short story of what happened, and I hope someone knows what happened and what this strange figure could be. Right now, nothing strange has happened, and I hope it will stay like this. Thank you for reading this, and I hope someone can help in figuring out what happened. My friend heard a scream and sobbing through my mic while I was sleeping. Posted by OznekPapi. Just some background about me and how I sleep. It isn't hard to wake me up, but it's hard to keep me up. I'll almost always open my eyes for a few seconds and say something to shoo away whoever woke me up and fall back to sleep, all without remembering any of it. So me and my friend spent a lot of time together on PlayStation, and at night we usually talk ourselves to sleep, or at least I do, since she never sleeps. She just plays a game while I fall asleep. One night we talked and we were on the phone, but she was playing games. I fell asleep around 9 or 10. I was pretty tired since I didn't get much sleep the night before. I'd woken up on my own at about 8 AM and she was still awake, asking me if I was okay. I just responded with a, "Yeah, why wouldn't I be?" And she started talking about how last night on my mic she heard a girl scream and then start crying on my end of the mic while she was playing Overwatch. She almost thought it was me at first, but as the sobbing got a little quieter, she heard one of my sleep grunts in the background. She got really scared and apparently woke me up after it happened, asking me if I was alright and if anybody was in my room. I just told her I was okay and my room is empty, but she could tell I didn't look as I didn't move. I learned later this all happened somewhere between 12 AM and 12:30 AM. It lasted about a full minute total, and my parents, who were both home in rooms on either side of mine, heard nothing. And as both work night shift, they were both awake at this time and later in the night. This was about 3 to 4 weeks ago, and one other time more recently. I was only half asleep and she said she heard screaming, but she ended the call and called me back to try and wake me up, but I once again didn't hear anything. Since then we haven't been doing that, but I don't know if it still happens or what it is. She definitely isn't the type to lie, and she seemed really spooked about it, so I believe her fully about it, and I don't want her to be alone on this. If any of you know what it could be, I'd appreciate some explanations or advice as to what I should do. I think there is something attached to me. Hi all, new to Reddit, always been a big horror fan. I've had this account for a day and went straight to the paranormal stories. From reading comments and seeing people's replies to others' experiences, hopefully someone out there can tell me what to do about my situation, or if I'm being paranoid. This might be lengthy, but I'll try to keep it short. This first creepy thing happened to me when I was too young to remember, but according to my family, I was in my room playing, and out of nowhere I apparently ran out screaming and crying that there was a man in my room with money, and he told me to shush. What I do remember from that event is a reoccurring nightmare about a man robbing an old lady. Scary for a 4-year-old, considering I barely knew what robbing someone meant. In that same house, I was in the room going to bed, and my head was facing towards a wall, and I could have swore from the inside of the wall I heard shh. Could have been an active over imagination, but I never forgot it, and it scared the crap out of me. More recently, as I've said, I've always been fascinated with ghosts and such, so when I was around 12, I'm 19 now, I thought it was a great idea to play with a Ouija board multiple times. What I did know is there were rules to a Ouija board, such as never play alone and always say goodbye. I broke both of those rules. Forgot to mention I moved around a lot throughout my whole life, so while living in that house not too much happened, except things like hearing footsteps. I can't remember much from that house, because nothing really significant happened. Fast forward to the next house I lived in. Different people, due to that person working in a bar. I'd be home alone most nights. Nothing really happened here except, well, being home alone at 15. At the time I was always scared. Always felt like I was being watched and afraid to leave my room to walk the rest of the empty house to use the bathroom. I occasionally saw shadows where I swore someone came into my room, and the other person in the house said the same thing a couple of times. I am now 19, living with my boyfriend. We'll call him Mark for privacy reasons. I've lived with Mark for almost 2 years now, and he said ever since I moved in, he's noticed a bunch of stuff happening. Weird noises, shadows, just really negative feelings out of nowhere. For instance, one time I had the hiccups. I asked Mark to come outside with me while I smoked a cigarette because I was always scared. He didn't know I was scared though, and wouldn't try to scare me. It was just a habit that he'd always come with me outside. So I finished my cigarette, and mid-smoke my hiccups stopped. We go back inside and go into the kitchen to get something to drink, and I realise I left the cup I was using upstairs in my room. Mark stays downstairs to get his drink, and I go up to get mine. A couple of minutes later, Mark comes upstairs and says, "I thought your hiccups were gone." I hadn't hiccuped since we were outside. He told me the whole way up the stairs, and until he heard me go into my room, he heard me hiccup. When I told him I didn't, that nobody else was in the house, I got the strangest feeling that something was following me, and it was mocking and mimicking me. Another time, it was dead of winter around 3 AM, and of course I was outside smoking. I always have my guard up outside, cause my neighbourhood isn't the greatest, and I have a big fear of wild animals. So I finished smoking and turned around to go inside and heard the loudest hey from what sounded like a large man with a very deep voice. As I said, I was keeping an eye on everything around me. Nobody was outside, and when I turned, there was nobody there either. No footprints in the snow anywhere, nothing. This happened another time. I was laying in bed, and for anxiety, I always have to sleep with my bed against the wall. So Mark is asleep. I'm wide awake and have been for a while, but figure I should go to bed for work tomorrow. The whole house is quiet and nobody is awake. I turned away from the wall to get comfy, and again what sounded like a deep man's voice, kinda angry, hey. When it happened, I was looking at Mark. He was fast asleep. It could have possibly been him. The voice sounded like it came from the wall behind me, right above my head. I immediately woke him up and told him, but what was there really to do? Another night I was laying down trying to sleep, unsuccessfully. I was wide awake and I heard someone say my name. Not even just my first name, my full government name. Clear as day. This time it sounded like a girl, and the voice sounded like it came from the other end of the bed, where Mark was sleeping. It sounded like it was calling to me and wanted me to look or follow it somewhere. So of course I stayed, so still it hurt, and wouldn't move or give any indication I was awake. I stayed there unmoving for what felt like an hour, shaking from fear and terrified until I fell asleep. A lot of the time I get a very strong feeling like I'm being watched, or just an energy in the room that feels angry. Just really strong negative vibes from out of nowhere on an otherwise good day. Recently I've been very drained, like the life is being sucked out of me. I haven't been to work in almost 2 months. I don't know how they haven't fired me, although our points for calling off are suspended. Thank you, Corona. In those 2 months, I've been wanting to lay down, relax, not go anywhere or do anything. Even if I wanted to, I can't. I feel sick without being sick. I just have no energy to do anything, even the things I love. Not going to work is hurting me in the long run, as you can imagine, money-wise, but I still can't find the motivation to do it. I was chalking it up to depression, but after reading other people's experiences, I'm thinking maybe it could be something else. I really feel like something is attached to me from not saying goodbye on those Ouija boards all those years ago. I used to do a lot of stupid stuff to try and contact ghosts, and I think I got more than I bargained for. I always feel like I'm being watched by something that hates me. Just overall sinister vibes. No other way to put it. My boyfriend convinced me to cover up this one mirror in our room because he gets bad vibes from it and when his reflection is anywhere in it, he says he gets depressed out of nowhere. He could be having the happiest day, but when he goes in front of it, it's hard not to. The mirror shows the entire room. He says he just doesn't feel right. So we've covered it up. There have been a lot more minor, small incidents happen, but those are the most significant. I can't describe it, but 9 out of 10 days I can just feel something there. Am I being paranoid from all the horror movies I've watched and read? Or could there be something that could be attached to me? If so, what can I do to get rid of it? Because as time goes on, it's getting worse. And the incidents are getting closer together. Granny's House, posted by redlightserenade. My parents have been divorced since I was 5 and my brother was 2. Growing up, my dad had to live with my granny a couple of times because he was financially irresponsible. I also lived with my granny for a bit when I was 20 after she broke her hip. I became a CNA after high school. My brother and I are terrified of Granny's house though. It all started when we were little. We would always sleep on an air mattress in the back room of the house. It was like a second living room, or maybe it's called a family room. I don't really know, but the room was behind the kitchen, and I remember that when the lights went out, it was so dark you couldn't see your hand if you put it in front of your face. One night I woke up and couldn't feel my brother sleeping next to me. Little man was a furnace, and I could always feel his body heat radiating off of him. At this time I was 8, so he was 5. I was always afraid of the dark at my granny's and got scared when I realised my brother wasn't in bed. So I got up to go find him. I didn't have to go far. As soon as I walked in the kitchen and turned on the light, I saw my brother just standing there. His back was to me. The layout of the kitchen is a little weird, so I'll use this time to try to explain. The best description I can think of is that the counters are parallel to each other, so the stove, oven, microwave were on one side and the kitchen sink and refrigerator was on the other side. And at the very end of the parallel kitchen was the laundry room. So since my brother's back was turned towards me, he was facing in the direction of the laundry room. The laundry room door was always kept shut, but when I found my brother, it was wide open. Even with the kitchen light on though, the laundry room was pitch black. Even though you couldn't see anything in the laundry room, my brother was staring at it. I finally asked him what he was doing, and he said, "I'm watching them." to make sure they don't come out and scare you. They always give us the dreams that make us cry. It's important to point out that both my brother and I have had the same reoccurring dreams at our granny's house for years. My dreams were different from his, but they were always the same. I would always dream that I was in my granny's house alone, and a huge rush of ancient Native Americans would attack the house. I would always hide in a different spot in the house, but they would always find me and carry me off right before waking up. My brother would always dream that he was being eaten alive by ants. His dream would always cause him to wake up in the exact same manner. He would wake up kicking and touching his arms like he was swiping something off of him, and he'd scream, "Get them off me," over and over again. And even though I knew he had those dreams, often I would still rip the blanket off him, thinking it would be the time the ants really got to him. I told my brother that I didn't see anything but the dark, but he assured me they were there. He then held his arm straight out and pointed at the laundry room and said, "There's a lot of them standing and looking at us. But don't worry, they know I can see them now. I'll protect you now that I have powers." I didn't ask any more questions, but I bet that they were Native Americans. We live in Arizona, so it wouldn't be far-fetched. Between that time and the time I moved in with my granny, my brother and I still had those dreams. Also, between those times our grandpa passed away, so when my granny broke her hip and asked me to move in for a bit, my grandpa had already passed. The day I actually moved in, my granny had one more night in the hospital, so I had the house to myself. Everything was fine until I turned the lights off. I didn't have any dreams or anything, but I woke up at 3 AM feeling like I had dirt in my mouth and desperately needed water. The water was in the kitchen where the laundry room is. The laundry room where the fucking things who gave my brother and me nightmares that made us cry. But strangely, that wasn't even what I was afraid of. I was afraid that when I turned on the light, I would see my grandpa sitting at the kitchen table like he always used to do. So what did I do? My dumb ass kept my eyes closed all the way to the kitchen, not turning on a single light, only running my hands along the wall to make sure I didn't run into anything. But I had to open my eyes to grab a cup and get the water from the fridge. With only the fridge light illuminating a small portion of the kitchen, I tried to only focus on my hands. But my brain loves to self-sabotage, so naturally I glanced at the dining table to see not only the silhouette of my morbidly obese, deceased grandpa sitting at the dining room table, I also, of course, saw a few other silhouettes alongside him. I ran so fast to my room, turning on every light I could reach on my way there, and stayed awake until my granny came home from the hospital. Shit had me spooked, but I love my granny so much. I suffered through similar things the entire time I stayed with her. The Old Farmhouse. Submitted by Rastagranny. Many years ago, I rented an old farmhouse after fleeing my relationship. The house was very cool. It had sloping ceilings in the second floor, bedrooms and gravity heat. Gravity heat means there are no heating ducts, so to the second floor, but instead has large holes in the main floor ceiling covered by elaborate wrought iron gates. This becomes relevant later. My friends helped me move in. One of my friends liked to make a big deal out of the fact that he was born with a caul, an extra flap of skin over his face, which supposedly makes him psychic. As we were carting stuff in, he told me he had a funny feeling about the place and thought it was probably haunted. I told him to shut up and to stop trying to freak me out. I'd never lived alone before and he knew it. The stairway to the second floor was too narrow and twisty to get my double bed up the stairs, so I made my bedroom on the main floor in the insulated front porch. My 5-year-old daughter slept upstairs. At first nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but it soon became clear that despite being rewired before I moved in, the electrical system was a bit wonky. I went through light bulbs at the rate of a couple a week, and they wouldn't just burn out, they blew out. My old stereo fried, as did my TV and my vacuum cleaner. No biggie, they were all old, I thought. Elements on the stove cracking and arcing in the shower of sparks was a little more disconcerting though. Sometimes I'd find things in odd places, like my car keys in the laundry basket or a can of soup under my pillow. But I did have a 5-year-old, so despite being puzzled at the oddity of it, I never gave it too much thought. Also, the cats never went upstairs, but I just assumed it was because we'd never lived in a 2-story house before. Soon after moving in, my daughter developed an imaginary playmate, a little boy about her age. I could hear her upstairs through the heating vent in the living room, playing and chattering for hours. I just thought it was cute, being an only child and all that. Lastly, at the top of the stairs between the bedrooms was a closet. I couldn't get that door to stay shut no matter what I did. I could clearly hear the latch click closed when it shut, but that didn't seem to matter. I even tried forcing a wedge into the bottom, only to find the door pushed open again on my next trip upstairs. This even occurred while my daughter was at school, so it couldn't have been her. One night, after working an evening shift and getting my daughter into bed, I got ready for bed myself. As I was washing my face, I heard a giggle. I turned my wet face toward the door and could see a little boy looking at me from the stairs. I grabbed a towel, wiped my face and looked again, in time to see a little brown shoe disappear over the top landing. I ran upstairs to find nothing but my daughter still in her bed, despite the fact the boy I saw had short brown hair, while my daughter's was long and blonde. I decided that it was just because I had water in my eyes and my daughter had to have been playing some sort of trick. By this time though, I was starting to worry if I was losing my mind. I never told anyone else about the occurrences, except for the electrical surges, as I didn't want to end up in a straitjacket. Things continued in this manner for 18 months. I lived there. Finally, I saved enough for a down payment on my own place and we moved. A month or so after I moved, I stopped by the old place to see if there was any mail. The new tenant, whom I had never met, was very pleasant and invited me in for tea. As we're sipping our tea, she casually asked me if I'd ever met the little boy upstairs. I just about dropped my cup. It turned out she'd managed to get her bed up those stairs and was sleeping in the room my daughter had used. She told me that 3 days after she moved in, she woke to find a little boy sitting at the foot of her bed. His name was Joseph. He told her he was 6 and he'd died in the house. He also told her that he was locked in the closet as punishment sometimes, and that he hated it because it was dirty, dark and cold. I finished my tea as fast as was polite and hightailed it out of there. Somehow having my experience verified made it worse, not better. I wasn't nuts after all, but there was a sad, lonely little boy I could have befriended too, had I known he was really there and not just a figment of my daughter's imagination. I never went back again, but I still think of Joseph often. I hope he gets a new playmate someday. An unwelcome house guest, posted by rastagranny. My husband was a trucker with a cross-country firm at the time. His driving partner separated from his girlfriend and, according to Hubs, couldn't afford to get his own place. I did find that odd, as he made as much as my husband, who clearly could afford the roof over our head. My little one was a newborn, and I was off on maternity leave. So, Buddy moves it into the spare room and makes himself at home. And I do mean at home. He'd walk into the living room and change the channel while I was watching TV, or turn on the stereo, fry himself a steak as a midnight snack, or eat an entire box of donuts and thought nothing of it. He'd take a shower and drop his dirty clothes on the floor for me to pick up and wash, and he stared at me a lot. I found him creepy and inconsiderate, and I told my husband so. Finally, after a couple of months of arguing about our unwelcome charity case, who never paid a cent, I told Hubs it was him or me. That sparked a huge argument between the two of them, with Buddy accusing Hubs of being pussy whipped and not standing up for his friends. That did it for Hubs, and he told the guy he needed to get out now. Hubs drove him to a hotel, and we thought that was the end of it. The next day we went to get groceries, and I had stopped buying anything but essentials. So Buddy couldn't eat us out of house and home. Imagine our shock when we got home and Buddy walks out of the kitchen wearing Hub's clothes and smoking his pipe. As you can imagine, the feces hit the fan. I went straight to the kitchen and phoned the police. In those days there was no 911, so it was taking a bit, and he heard me talking. He bolted out of the house and we never saw him again. He never turned up at work again either. We discovered that he had broken a basement window to get in, so we boarded up the basement and changed the locks. A week or so later, I decided to use my cash nest egg I had stashed in my underwear drawer. It was gone, and I realised several pairs of my underpants were gone as well. I considered phoning the cops again at that point, but we decided we didn't want to remind him of our existence, and we moved shortly thereafter. I sure hope the next tenants never got any unexpected house guests. Thank you for listening, my little hellhounds. If you have any spooky or scary stories you would like narrated on the channel, then please email them to horror19872@gmail.com, or you can submit them to my subreddit r/homeofscares, or follow me on Twitter @homeofscares. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video if you want more. Good night, my little hellhounds.